friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Katie. This is Life Between Words. How's everyone doing? The last couple times I've talked to you, maybe I have been filled to the brim with anxiety, and while my anxiety has not gone away, I am feeling so much better, and I don't know whether I'm just sort of getting used to this new normal. My reading in the second half of March plummeted. I finished maybe one more book, two more books maybe, and because it was middle grade March, middle grade books are not hard to finish, but I really struggled. I just want to say this. It's okay to feel however you're feeling in this time. We haven't lived through anything like this in our lifetimes, really, most of us. We've gone through momentous things, obviously. We've gone through really hard times as a country and as a world, but nothing quite like this. I just wanted to say that. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope that you're all staying well and healthy, and let's move on. Oh my gosh, I hope you can't hear that noise. I think that's my son playing with one of those stud finders, like wall, where you hold it up to the wall and it finds the stud and it makes a beeping noise. Ours is broken and it just makes the beeping noise, and I can hear him playing with it. He's supposed to be napping, but I don't think he is. Anyway, my reading plummeted, my productivity plummeted, my kids are now home all the time. The weather's been terrible, so we haven't even been able to really go out into our backyard very often. We had one beautiful day 2 days ago, which was just balm to my soul, but now it's gray and rainy, kind of snow showery again, and we can't go to playgrounds and stuff because that's not safe either. It's been a madhouse. So not only did my reading plummet just because of my emotional state, my state of anxiety, but also just circumstances in family life has also been crazy. My husband is an essential worker, so he is still leaving the house and working and interacting with the public. I have to deal with my kids a lot on my own, which is all fine. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. I really do mean to move on from that. So let's talk about what I read in the month of March. I read, I'm gonna say 7 books, even though technically I finished one of them in April. All right, I don't know, should I do them in order? What do you guys like? Let me know below. Do you like the order in which I talk about books to be least favorite to most favorite, or do you like chronologically how I read throughout the month? I guess I'm gonna do chronologically right now. I started off the month reading Each Little Bird That Sings by Deborah Wiles. This is about a little girl named Comfort Snowburger. I know the name is kind of ridiculous, but all the names in this book are ridiculous. Her cousin Peach, who's a little boy. There's her best friend is named Declaration. Comfort's family owns a funeral parlor, and so she has been brought up in an environment that has a very normalized view of death, and that is very refreshing, honestly. But then tragedy after tragedy follows one another in Comfort's life over the course of one summer. Death has never been so personal to her before. This book is all about grief and exploring grief from a child's perspective, and it is beautiful and wise and wonderful. I absolutely loved this book. I thought that it was just really well done. It felt a little bit like a cross between like a Kate DiCamillo and like a Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. It had those sort of same feelings. This will be a favorite of mine for sure. The next book I read fulfilled the challenge of a book with illustrations for middle grade March, one of the challenges. I think I'm going to say what challenge it fulfills. So I read Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin. This book was okay. I feel like the writing was fine, the story was fine. It's a retelling of Snow White and Rose Red, and I liked it. I feel like I would have loved this book as a little girl, but as an adult, I just did not feel very attached to the story or the characters, so it was okay. Although I will say that the illustrations in this book are gorgeous. Let me see if I can find one that I really like. Like, there's an example of an illustration. I don't know how well you can see that, but the illustrations are beautiful. Oh, here's another full page, double page illustration. Emily Winfield Martin writes some of my very favorite picture books, like that I read to my young children. So I had high hopes. I was a little let down, I guess, in the story, but I still liked it. I also read, for the very first time ever in my life, A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. A Little Princess fulfilled the book-to-movie adaptation prompt. I didn't rewatch A Little Princess, and I do know that the movie that came out in the 90s is a little different. Someone's calling me. I'm gonna have to call them back. I read A Secret Garden when I was little and loved The Secret Garden. It's one of my favorites. I haven't read it since I was probably a kid, so I'd really like to revisit that one. But I think that I much prefer The Secret Garden, having not read it in years and years. But I'm still gonna go out on a limb and say that I prefer The Secret Garden to A Little Princess. I really liked A Little Princess. It was a delightful, sweet story with lots of good sort of moral lessons in it, which is very indicative of the time period in which it was written. A lot of children's books imparted moral lessons in them. It's about a little girl named Sarah Crewe who grew up with her father in India, and she comes to an age when her father thinks that she really needs to be educated and be with other little girls her age. So he sends her to a boarding school, and something happens in which she is left alone and penniless, and the person who cares for the kids at the boarding school keeps her on as a servant, and she's treated miserably. And it's sort of her journey through that situation. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I loved the plot. The thing that took this a little bit down in my estimation is that Sarah Crewe is just a little bit too perfect. She says she's not. You know, she talks about struggling with the things that she does, but she always makes the right choice, and she always appears to do things exactly right. And just given her situation, it's a little unbelievable that she would not struggle at all with what happens to her. So I really liked it. It's just not a 5-star read. I think I gave it 4 stars. I knocked off a star because Sarah was a little too perfect, but other than that, I really did enjoy it. I think the reason that I like The Secret Garden a little bit better is because Mary, the main character, has a much better character arc. So you see Mary grow. She's just more believable as a kid, and you see her grow and change. I just feel like it's done a little bit better than in this book. A few years ago, I read Echo by Pam Munoz-Ryan. I've talked about it a million times on my channel. It's an amazing middle grade book. So this year, I read Esperanza Rising because it's another Pam Munoz-Ryan book that I own and hadn't read. And this book is a little less fantastical. It's actually based on Pam Munoz-Ryan's, I think it's based on her grandmother's story. So Esperanza is a young girl who lives in Mexico with her wealthy family, and something happens and her mother and her have to flee to America. So they're immigrants, and they end up working on a migrant farm in California. I think it takes place in the 1930s. It's about Esperanza. She starts out as extremely privileged and spoiled, and she learns how to work hard, and she learns what is really truly important. And I just thought that this was such a beautiful book. Definitely a 5-star read for me. I loved Esperanza Rising. Now that I have read more than one Pam Munoz-Ryan book, I think I can safely say that she's a favorite middle grade author. I just think she's wonderful. Her characters and her stories are just so well developed and thoughtful. Esperanza Rising fulfilled the prompt of a book that takes place in another country. And I feel like I stretched this one a little bit because it only takes place in Mexico for the first part of the book, and then the rest of it takes place in California, which is in the same country that I live in, so I smudged it a little, but it still works. For the prompt, a book about books or stories, I read a book called A Kind of Paradise by Amy Rebecca Tan. This is about a little girl who gets in trouble in school, and as punishment over summer break she needs to volunteer at her local library. The main character's name in this book is Jamie, and I really liked it, although I have to say, I was reading this book right as my ability to concentrate on anything just went out the window because the world exploded. So yeah, It took me a long time to get through this book, so much so that I really lost momentum. I feel like I would have loved it so much more if I'd read it at a different point. Partially because I was reading it, and it's about a little girl who is volunteering in a library, and the libraries started to close. The libraries in Madison stayed open for a time, but then, you know, we got a shelter-in-place order, and of course everything that was non-essential had to close, and libraries are unfortunately considered non-essential. So libraries were closed, and this is about a little girl in a library, and I was like, there's just the cognitive dissonance with the books that take place in contemporary times. Just, it was too much for me. I couldn't handle it. I can now, for whatever reason. I've gotten past that, but right when everything was exploding, it was too much for me. It was like if my books weren't mirroring my own reality, I couldn't get into them. So I really struggled with this one because of that very specific reason. So I think I gave it 4 stars because I loved it, but it just wasn't the right time. But I was so far into the book that I couldn't bring myself to put it down and not finish it and come back to it later. So I really liked it. It is a book for book lovers, and it's full of really wonderful, heartwarming characters, and I loved the main character, Jamie. I loved what she learned over the course of the summer. It was just a really great book, so I'd like to maybe revisit it at some point when I am in a better place emotionally to read a book about people who are interacting with one another outside of the home. Our middle grade March group pick was The Book of Boy by Catherine Gilbert Murdoch. This was probably a 3-star book for me. I'm a little sad that the book we chose wasn't as sort of universally, or it didn't have the kind of broad appeal that our last 2 books did, but I still liked it, and it did make for a great discussion on our Instagram Live. I loved the discussion because it really made me think about things that I didn't necessarily pick up on as I was reading. So this is about a little boy named Boy. It takes place during medieval times, and it's about this little boy who is a hunchback who ends up going on a quest for some relics with a man named Secundus, or Secundus. I called him Secundus, I don't know why. Secundus is making a pilgrimage, and he ends up bringing Boy along, and this is really a book about self-discovery. Boy learning to accept who he is and embrace who he is and find his place and his purpose in the world. And that part of the book I really loved. From a faith perspective, theologically, this book has a lot of issues, I think, but as just a book and a story and telling about this time period and pilgrimages that people made and the relics that people found or thought they found, that was very interesting. So I'm really glad I read it. I'm really glad that this was made for such a great middle grade March book discussion. It just wasn't a favorite. So those are my thoughts for now on The Book of Boy. The next book is one I actually finished in April. But I started it in March, and I feel like I want to talk about it for middle grade March, so I'm going to talk about it here rather than my April wrap-up. And that's Until Tomorrow, Mr. Marsworth by Sheila O'Connor. This book was so good. It was so good. So I just finished it the other day, and I haven't really finalized my thoughts on it, so maybe I should wait to talk about this book in April. But I really want everyone to read this book, so I'm going to talk about it now. But this book is about a little girl named Renee Kelly. It takes place in 1968, during the Vietnam War. Renee Kelly and her 2 brothers moved to Minnesota to live with their grandmother for the summer. Their father got a job working in North Dakota, and so they're living with their grandmother. Their mother has recently passed away. And Renee's older brother is 18 years old. His name is Billy, and she is very worried about him being drafted into the Vietnam War. She takes up a paper route, and she begins an epistolary friendship with this man named Mr. Marsworth, who's he's a recluse. He has a history with this town. He's very unliked. But anyway, Rennie and him develop this friendship. And so this book is written, it's an epistolary novel. It's written in letters back and forth between Rennie and Mr. Marsworth. Their friendship is so sweet. Ultimately, this book is about peace, the path to peace, what it means to seek peace, how to fight for peace. Rennie is working very hard to try and find a way to keep Billy from being drafted. And Mr. Marsworth helps her find a way for Billy to not be drafted. And in that help, they talk about what peace means in a time of war, what it would mean for Billy to be a conscientious objector, especially in a town that sees people who either don't join the military or don't put their name in for the draft as traitors to their country. I just thought this book and its message was so beautiful. Rennie Kelly is an amazing character. She's so precocious. She has so much gumption. She reminds me a lot of Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird. She is just so spunky. Oh, this book is just, it is a book to treasure. So I might do a recommendation video at some point on epistolary novels that I think are great. That format is never one that I'm like, oh, an epistolary novel, I'm gonna love that, I'm gonna pick it up and read it. But then when I do, I usually end up loving it. So this is one that I would highly recommend. This is also one of those middle grade books that transcends the category. It should be put into the hands of adults and children alike, in my humble opinion. So these were all the books that I read for middle grade March. I'm still in the middle of, I finished another one in April and I'm still in the middle of another one. My reading groove still hasn't come back in full swing. So we'll see how much I actually get done this month. Let me know what your favorite book was in the month of April, in the month of March I mean. If you participated in middle grade March, let me know what your favorite middle grade March book was. I think my two favorite books that I read this month were Until Tomorrow, Mr. Marsworth, and Each Little Bird That Sings, with a close runner-up between A Kind of Paradise and Esperanza Rising. These four were all great and all worth your time if you're looking for some middle grade books that have my seal of approval. They were wonderful. Don't forget, friends, to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. It would mean so much to me. And I think with that, friends, I'm going to sign off here. I'll talk to you later.